ערב של שושנים נצאנה אל הבוסתן, מור בסמים ולבונה לרגלך מפתן. לילה יורד לאט ברוח שושן נושבה, חווה אלחש לך שיר בלט זמר של אהבה. שחר הומה יונן ראשך מעלה טללים, פיך אל הבוקר שושנה הכתפינו לי. לילה יורד לאט ורוח שושן נושבה, הווה אלחש לך שיר בלט זמר של אהבה. זמר של אהבה. יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה. One more time. יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 yo, יא לה 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 לה, יא לה 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 לה. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 yo, ya la 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 la. La 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 yo. Ya la 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 la. If you'd like to join us, we're on page 11. דודי לי ואני לא הרואה בשושנים דודי לי מי זאת עולה מן המדבר מן המדבר דודי לי ואני לא הרואה בשושנים דודי לי. One more time from the beginning. דודי לי ואני לא הרואה בשושנים דודי לי מי זאת עולה מן המדבר מן המדבר דודי לי ואני לא הרואה בשושנים דודי לי.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome this evening. As you can see, we have a little bit of a different setup. Our thought for this evening is, given that we have a wonderful speaker to whom we'd like to dedicate the majority of our time this evening, rather than tonight featuring a full Shabbat service, this is going to be a Hadlakat Nerot, a candle lighting, and a kabbalat Shabbat ceremony where we will welcome Shabbat, and we are going to sing songs that are greeting the Shabbat, mostly from the book of Psalms. And that will be our main service this evening, which of course we will add to Mourner's Kaddish for those of us who are observing yartzites or recent losses. And so I'd like to welcome you. We're going to be a little bit informal tonight. You can see based on how we're sitting. The entire service orientation of this is going to be only around 15, 20 minutes or so, depending on how long the rabbi speaks. And then we are going to welcome our speaker, who emailed me just before the service to say that she is stuck in traffic, but will be here for sure by the time we finish our service at 7:30 to speak on time. So with that, I'd like you, as always, as we ask our congregation, to please look around your general area. Begin by finding at least one person you don't know, introducing yourself, saying hello. We are going to turn to our to our opening words of Hine Mato, found on page 10.
Hine Mato u'manayim sheverachim gam yachad. 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 הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
I'd like to call up the Asher family, the Moss family. Hey, Asher.
The Asher family.
The Asher family, Asher and Posse, to light the Shabbat candles.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We turn to page 24 and we welcome in the spirit of Shabbat, this time of rest, with the words of Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Huni L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzetechem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yalalai, yalalai, lai, 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 yalalai, lai, 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 yai, lai, 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 yai, lai, 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 yai, lai, lai, yai, lai, 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 yalalai, lai, lai, yalalai, lai, lai, yai, lai, 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 yalalai, lai, lai. Page 10. Yedid nefesh av harachaman, Yedid nefesh av harachaman, Meshach avdecha, El retzonecha, Meshach avdecha, Yadadadai lai lai, El retzonecha, Yarutz. Yarutz avdecha kemo hayal yishtachave yalai el muladarecha Yarutz avdecha kemo אל מול הדרך.
before we enter into Shabbat with the words of Lecha Dodi. It's our own custom here at the synagogue that we take a moment to take stock of our week. Friday night is supposed to be a time of what's called Chazarat HaShavua, a review of our week in which we think about the moments of the past 6 days. We take in the best of those moments, we carry them with us. We leave the other ones behind. We don't let those moments of guilt or of stress enter into Shabbat with us. And so in order to help our congregation here enter into the sanctuary of peace, we're asking if anyone here has anything good that's happened to them this week that they'd be willing to share. Oh, wow, good, a bunch already. That's fantastic. It'll help us enter into Shabbat. So, I've been reminded I should repeat after people in case you don't hear what the people are saying. So I'll do my best. Moved into their new home near their grandchildren in Valhalla. Mazel tov. Yes. You have a minion. Third granddaughter out of 10. Wow. All granddaughters or grandchildren? Oh. Excellent. Yes, Rabbi. Oh, Mazel Tov. Who else we got? Yes, Dan. Wonderful. So Stan, he attended in Washington, D.C. following the AIPAC conference at Washington Hebrew congregation. There were 3 different weddings, each of them Israelis being married in the U.S. in weddings that would not be sanctioned by the Rabbanut, by the Jewish oversight in Israel, and so it had to occur here, and it was a beautiful ceremony. And yes, then maybe you can say something about that later tonight. Thank you. Dick, yes? Wow. Go buy art from his daughter. That's what he said. She's doing very well at the Affordable Art Fair. Yes. Yes, Mike. You guys got that? He's back from AIPAC, and he had his second cataract surgery. So now he can see actually what his wife looks like. That's fantastic. Good. Mazel tov. We think. Yes, Fred. How nice. We went to Toronto to their daughter-in-law's baby naming. The baby naming's wedding shower. No. Yeah. When there's a baby naming there. I'm sorry. Too much to the rabbi to remember. Anyone else? Last call? Excellent. Before I mess any of them up. We're going to continue with Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi, which is found on page 20. We're just going to sing the very opening of this. If we time this just right, then our guest speaker will walk in just as we're greeting the bride, which would be pretty funny, actually. Please join us for Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, likrat kala, pnei shabbat nikabla. Lecha Dodi, likrat לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, נקבלה. שבת שלום. שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת שלום ומבורך. שבת שלום, שבת שלום, שבת שלום ומבורך. רק שלך דודי. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, נקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, נקבלה.
We are going to take a moment for Misha Berach, in which we think of those in our community who are in need of healing at this time. This evening we are thinking of Sarah Rachel bat Leah va'Aryeh, Shmuel Yitzhak ben Herschel, Gidel bat Getzel, Shalom ben Miriam, Tzvia bat Ness, Ellen Abrams, Mark Blindman, Amy Chasen, Susan Friedman, Henry Garrett, Amy Gerard, Julian Glatzer, Lisa Goodman, Julian Juster, Danielle Leventhal, Mark Levy, Jim Nagel, Joseph Materna, Jonathan Raffa, Sid Silverman, Alan Trustman, and Kathleen White. For those, if I've mispronounced any of these names, or if there's anyone that you are wishing for healing at this time, please do so as I look throughout the congregation. We turn to the words of Misha Berach on page 253.
Misha Berach avoteinu מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Berach imotenu mekor habracha laotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
We take a moment now as well in order to honor those, the memories of those who have passed away recently or at this time in years past. I will tell you that today was a very difficult day for our congregation. Not only did a congregant of ours, we have the funeral for his mother in Great Neck earlier this morning, but this afternoon we laid to rest a third grader from Roaring Brook who, after 3 years of an incredible battle with brain cancer, succumbed to the illness earlier this week. The funeral was in her parents' in the yard of the family off of Douglas Road, and there were about 300, 400 people there. The entire school nurses, doctors from Washington, D.C., from Boston, from all over, in order to celebrate the bravery of this little girl. And so there's a lot of our community that's in a lot of pain this evening as well. And so we grieve with their family. We are thinking at this time, therefore, of Nancy Alani, who was laid to rest this morning, of Scarlett Olivia Chwatko, who was memorialized this afternoon, and also those that passed away in recent weeks: Leanne Glassgold, Harriet Gollin, Dyke Colbert, Howard Lerner, and Marie Sommer. We also are observing the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the passing of Howard Agatston, Anita Backenheimer, Samuel Besson, Ruth Blechman, Rochelle Siren, Herbert Davis, Harry Elkin, Joan Ferentz, Charles Freed, Fanny Ginsberg, Florine Heidecker, Bernard Leff, Nancy Narva, Mona Pastor, Betty Rosenberg, Felix Schnurr, Janet Shields, Selma Silberman, and Carol Smiley. I'd like to first ask that if you have heard the name of your loved one read just now, please rise at this time so we may identify the mourners among us and remain standing. And now I'll ask if there's anyone else here who is in mourning at this time, remembering a loved one. Please rise and say the name of the person in addition that you'd like to name. We now stand as a congregation in solidarity with the mourners among us as we turn to page 294 in the mourners for the Mourners Kaddish. 294. Yitgadal v'kadash shemei Rabba be'amad divrach hirutei ve'almich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael ba'gala uzman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam ulmei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudasha b'rechu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata ta'amiran be'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav huya asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, imru, amen. Hey, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, imru, amen.
I actually think that version of Oseh Shalom is a wonderful bridge between the service this evening, our kabbalat shabbat, and our speaker this evening in two ways. First of all, that version was popularized by a group called Nava Tehila, which is an Israeli group that their music now coming over to the U.S. and showing the influence and the connection between the two. And also, when we're speaking tonight about the relationship between the Jewish people and the rest of the world, the State of Israel and the League of All Nations, that you might notice that the traditional liturgy there is shifted slightly in the Hebrew. We say, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel. That is, the prayer usually says that there should be peace over all of Israel. That's it. And the prayer has been amended to say, let there be peace over all of Israel and for all inhabitants who dwell on the earth. And so it is the universalizing of a message in a particular moment. And a lot of what we're going to talk about this evening is about the particular and the universal and the Jewish people and their relationship to the rest of the world. So with that, it's my honor to call back to our synagogue here Dr. Batya Ungar-Sargon, the opinion editor for The Forward, who I am just so grateful to have here this evening. Good to see you. Of course. Here is, well, I'll do a quick brief intro you can put on the lavalier. Is that okay? Sounds good. Who is just, when it comes to understanding the issues we're talking about this evening, the issues of the relationship between the American Jewish and the Israeli populations, how Israel is being understood within the greater political framework, and where we are as a country in terms of both anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. Batya is someone that I personally look to for wisdom and guidance. Her writing for The Forward is exemplary and amazing and well-researched, and if you don't read her writing already, you should. If you are on Twitter, you should follow her. If you're not on Twitter, you should join Twitter just to follow her and to get her updates and commentary, because, again, it is a way that I personally learn a lot, and I think that you would find the same thing. So I know we're bridging between now tefillah, prayer, and more of a discussion, so it's okay to applaud now. So please help me in welcoming my friend and my colleague, Batya Ungar-Sargon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You got to move it a little higher up, I think.
Okay.
Right there. Good, right up. So,
Is that working? Is that good? Yeah, okay.
well, you know what we should maybe do? It's more important for them to hear you than me, so let's switch.
Are you sure?
Yeah. They hear me all the time. I got this. I got one here. And then I'll put this thing on and we'll figure the whole thing out. So what I thought we would do this evening, that's okay, you can if Steve Adler can hear, then everyone's good. Then everyone can hear. Okay, you might not like what I say, but you can hear it, which is fantastic. Okay, so what I thought we'd do this evening is I wrote out a series of questions that I would like to ask that I think really bridge the various topics that we'll be exploring this evening. I also, for those of you who are web savvy, I posted these earlier this week on Facebook and asked if anyone had any additional questions to ask. So we'll have time for some of those at the end of this if you would like, but I think this is hopefully a wide net survey over the issues we'd like to delve in this evening. So without further ado, should we just jump right in, or do you have an opening statement of sorts, something you really want to get off your chest first you'd like to say to everyone?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so sorry about the loss in your community. That's devastating. It's just really an honor to be back here. The first time I came to speak here, I really felt such a deep connection to your rabbi and also to this community. So I'm just really, really honored and happy and grateful to be back, and thank you for having me. And also, you're so lucky to have this guy as your rabbi, providing moral leadership to you and to the rest of the world.
Your job is done here. Thank you. So the first question I'd like to ask is, like several of us in the room, raise your hand if you attended the AIPAC conference this week. There's a couple of us here that you can see. You just returned and you wrote a very lengthy article, an analysis in The Forward. The organization AIPAC has received a lot of criticism as of late, mostly for being perceived as writing a blank check to the Netanyahu government, despite its many controversies. And I'm just wondering how you would respond and what were your impressions of the conference?
So it's funny because AIPAC was in the news thanks to me and Ilhan Omar, because the congresswoman and I got into this sort of exchange on Twitter where she wrote that sort of famous "It's all about the Benjamins" comment about, she was talking about why U.S. politicians support Israel so much, and she said it's all about the Benjamins, and I sort of said, I wonder who she's talking about, although I think I can guess because it was the second tweet she had written that sort of delved into what I felt was problematic language vis-a-vis Jews, and she wrote back AIPAC. And what she did was she sort of put us lefties in this weird position of having to defend AIPAC because she was using AIPAC as a stand-in for Jews using money to control politicians, which we know is sort of like age-old anti-Semitic trope. At the same time, AIPAC is an incredibly powerful institution that has helped Israel get away with more things than I personally would like them to. So AIPAC is the strongest of the Israel lobby groups, and as such, in my mind, it has the greatest moral responsibility when it comes to Israel. Because it is advocating for Israel and advocating for Israel so effectively, it has a greater moral responsibility when Israel strays from the democratic norms that we as liberals and as Jews require in order to be happy, right? And so it has, in terms of AIPAC's role in enabling Israel to get farther and farther away from the kind of thriving democracy that we would like to see, AIPAC's moral failure is incredibly grave. I don't think there's any two ways about that. AIPAC's policy is explicitly not to speak out against against politicians in Israel. Their policy is only to advocate and not to give their opinion. That's just their policy, and I think it's a mistake. So they're unlike Sheldon Adelson and they're unlike J Street, both of whom will give their opinion about Israel as part of their lobbying. AIPAC's policy is to be silent and to give support no matter who the Israeli government is. I think that's a moral failure, and I think it's a moral failure especially in the age of Bibi. However, I think AIPAC is a remarkable institution. And the reason I think that is because while it has failed us morally, it is a strategic paragon in that the number one value at AIPAC is, who was there? Who was at AIPAC? What's the number one value at AIPAC? What'd you say? What was the word? Supporting Israel, but how? They have like a catchphrase. Bipartisan, right? You read the article, okay. So I just want to read you some quotes of things that I heard at AIPAC. Now I went as, a journalist and as somebody who has criticized AIPAC before. I just want to read you some of the things I heard there. This quote I heard over the loudspeaker. For those of you who haven't been, 20,000 people come to this thing, and most of it happens in this enormous, completely pitch black hall where there's 20,000 people sitting, and then there's the speakers will come and there's these huge TV screens to show you what's going on. So in between, while we were waiting for one of the programs to start, in this pitch black room, this sort of disembodied voice came up over the loudspeaker and said, "How we treat the AIPAC member sitting beside us is as important as how we treat our guests on the stage. You may disagree with the person sitting next to you, but you are united in your mission." This is incredibly my jam. Let me read you another one. Arthur Brooks got up there and he said, "Our job is to persuade them with love. Nobody in history has ever been insulted into agreement." And then this was from the AIPAC's Managing Director of National Affairs. And this, I think, really gets to the heart of it. "This hall is one of the last places where you can find everyone from progressive Democrats to conservative Republicans working together and applauding together. That is all the more reason to protect against that which can divide us. For the sake of our movement, we have to look to the person to our left or to the person to our right who might actually be more right or more left. We have to see our political opposites not as adversaries, but as central to our success. We don't have to agree on everything, but we have to agree to protect and respect each other's place in this tent." I just think that these are the most beautiful words. AIPAC is, as far as I can tell, the last place in America where Republicans and Democrats are still working together, consciously putting aside that which distinguishes them for a higher purpose. They are consciously knowing that the person sitting next to them at AIPAC is probably a Trump supporter, but they are putting that aside for a higher purpose. That purpose for them is Israel. And I just think that that is such a beautiful, moving, I mean, it moves me aesthetically, but also strategically. It's genius, and it's where their power lies. And it's where their power lies. And if you think about it, it's the opposite of what's happening on the left. What's happening on the left? What's their favorite tactic right now for making anything happen? Boycott, right? So AIPAC is saying, we don't agree on everything. We're going to put that aside because the Jewish people is relying on us, right? That's sort of essentially what it is. The left is saying, oh, you don't agree with me about this tiny thing or this tiny thing? You're out. You're canceled. You're boycotted. They boycott me now because of, you know, these tiny little differences between them. They're against the occupation, I'm against the occupation. They want civil rights for Palestinians, I want civil rights for Palestinians. But I'm treif because I stepped on the wrong side of some tiny dividing line. Why would you do that? Why would you cast out anybody who is slightly different to you? And it doesn't work, right? So I think for me, AIPAC was just this sort of reminder of, I don't agree with the way they're doing, I don't agree with their idea about how to pursue their goals in terms of, you know, should they be criticizing Bibi, should they not be criticizing Bibi? I think that in an age in which Bibi is explicitly partnering with avowed racists, it is a huge moral failure not to. It is a moral imperative to be critical of that. But at the same time, I came away thinking that AIPAC truly is showing us the best America has to offer. It's like it was a callback to a better America, a time when we were able to put aside our differences and able to pursue higher goals. So whatever your goal is it climate change? Is it prison reform? Is it free, you know, Medicare for all? Whatever it is, you're going to have to work with people who disagree with you. You're going to have to find people to make common cause with. So I would say it was like a very ambivalent. On the one hand, strategically, I was very, very moved and very excited. And on the other hand, the moral failure really is one that I think, especially for Jews, we have to speak up about.
So I actually want to follow up with you on that one. Here's the camera. There we go. I'll just put this thing a little further away. Because I will admit I tend to be a bit more forgiving when it comes to AIPAC. And one thing I want to push on, it seems to me as though your compliment of AIPAC and your critique of AIPAC are mutually exclusive. That is that AIPAC cannot cater to the left and right equally if it does not have a laser focus on a relationship with Israel, regardless of politics of either the American or the Israeli side. So how would you see them really gaining that moral strength that you want them to have while not losing the ability to be applicable to all?
So I would say, so the Democrats recently passed a resolution. It's an anti-BDS resolution. Let me take a step back. The Republicans passed in the Senate an anti-BDS resolution that had some free speech issues.
Does everyone here know what BDS is? The Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction Movement.
Thank you, sorry. The Democrats wanted to also oppose BDS, but they care about the Constitution. So they passed their own BDS resolution that did not have the free speech issues, but had in it a commitment to the two-state solution. Because all of our American politicians, except for one, Rashida Tlaib, believe in the two-state solution. That's just across the board. Actually, there are probably some Republicans who don't because they believe in the greater Israel. But every Democratic politician believes in a two-state solution and opposes the boycott. That's just sort of where the party is at. So to me, AIPAC does unofficially sometimes and officially other times support a two-state solution. They claim to be like they won't say it explicitly some years, but if you say that they're waffling, they'll come back and say no, we do still stand by it, but then it won't be in the byline. Some years it is, some years it isn't. So they do waffle on it, but they in their mind support a two-state solution. So once they've already said that, and all of their members have to sign on to that because that is part of how they are portraying themselves. At that point, when it becomes clear that Netanyahu no longer supports a two-state solution, I do think that it is well within their bipartisanship to say, well, we are going to insist on that. We are going to tell American politicians that they should feel free to speak up about that because that is part of our position. And they haven't done that. They've used their same tactics in order to pursue blind support. And I think that that's problematic. Does that answer your question?
Sure, and I think it's a good place to continue the conversation. I think that from my experience in Israel and with Israelis, the view is not that the average Israeli does not support the two-state solution, it's that they don't see it available. That at the moment, that whether it was the fail of Oslo, which was followed up by the Second Intifada, whether it was the withdrawal of Gaza, which was then answered with thousands of rockets, that the average Israeli does not see a peace partner on the other side. And so to make moves towards peace or to be pressured towards a two-state solution when you're walking into a lion's den is not productive. Would you agree with that? And how, if that's the way that the average Israeli feels, in what sort of way can the American community bring them any closer to a peace that they think is impossible?
I would definitely agree with the first half of that. When I go to Israel, I'm overwhelmed by something in particular, which is that these people don't want to be occupying the Palestinians. They're not doing this because they want to be. They feel like this is something that is less than ideal. It seems like they want it because they vote for people who perpetuate it. But when you talk to them, they say, yeah, of course we'd rather not be doing this, but we don't see a way out of it. And that has made it not urgent. So the main difference when it comes to the Palestinians between our community and Israelis is that for us, I believe, it is urgent that we stop occupying the Palestinians. It is urgent that we solve the moral crisis in Israel, or that they do, because we can't vote. I think for them, it's not ideal, but it's not urgent. And, when you go there and you look at the polling, you'd be shocked. What percentage of Israelis do you think identify as left, like call themselves left, would you say? Would you guess? 20%? 10? It's 6%. So the Israeli community has moved radically to the right, even since the last election. You see the polling, it's moved to the right? So Benny Gantz, who essentially agrees with Bibi on everything, is being considered center, even though he's very much on the right. There's no left, so when there's no left, everything kind of moves. So in that sense, I think our communities are very, very, very different at this point. Like you ask American Jews, like what percentage of us are progressive? Even at AIPAC, there was a huge, huge contingent of progressives, huge. And our politics tend to have us, 80% of us are Democrats. So that, I think, it gives me pause in terms of exactly like what is our role in all of this? And it's another thing that, when people on the left start boycotting and they want to boycott Zionists and boycott liberal Zionists, I feel like saying to them, only Israel can end the occupation. And only liberal lefty Jews can convince them to. So why are you kicking us out of the left? Like, why do you want a left that has no Jews in it when lefty Jews are the only ones who are going to make anything happen in Israel? But then sometimes I think, are we really? Like, as American Jews who are increasingly divergent from our Israeli brothers and sisters, and when only 6% of them are willing to even say that they're on the left, it starts to feel a little hopeless. I don't know, how do you handle that hopelessness?
Well, I thought there was a really good book on this, actually, and I've suggested to some, I gave a couple of suggestions. I gave a couple of book suggestions in a recent Rabbi's article, which they all read, of course. And one is I really enjoyed Michael Goodman's book, Catch 67. And in it, if you haven't read it, it's a fantastic way of really looking at the points of the left and the right when it comes to the 67 borders and the settlements. It was a bestseller in Israel, which says something. And he comes up with a final proposal at the end. He says that we cannot create peace now, but we can make things more peaceful. And the best way we can make things more peaceful and lower the pressure is by creating a contiguous Palestinian Authority that is not separated by checkpoints. So if I want to go from Ramallah to Bethlehem to Hebron, I can do so without having to see an IDF soldier, having to encounter occupation in my midst, and Israel could still keep the same security level as it has now, but allow at least there to be a Palestinian semi-state within the West Bank. And I personally thought that was a really interesting proposal, and since this was a bestseller in Israel, I've been waiting to see this come to fruition through political standpoint, but I have not seen it. But I probably share Israeli pessimism when it comes to the viability for peace at this moment. And so for me, maybe I feel more of a reticence to apply pressure to the Israeli government to pursue a peace which is not available. But I would like to see something like that personally. Let's talk about it with the Israeli elections then, because the elections are coming up just next month. And then with this, you have this lovely gift of the American administration to Netanyahu of the recognition of Israeli sovereignty in the Golan Heights. So I'd love to ask you, how do you see that? Do you think that will be a boost to Netanyahu? And do you see that this, with the emergence of the centrist party with Gantz and Lapid, there's a party called Blue and White, Kahol Levan, which is really former Likudniks, former of Netanyahu's party, but Netanyahu has been in some ways so damaged by the corruption charges and the racist statements that even with a similar platform, perhaps a different persona could lead towards a new party within Israel. How do you see this playing out, and especially vis-a-vis the recognition of Golan Heights?
So a lot of people have been saying that the recognition of the Golan is kind of going to lead to sort of the annexation of the West Bank. I don't find that necessarily convincing as an argument, just because the situations are so different. So the Golan Heights is that little sort of kind of thumb at the top on the right in Israel that sort of used to be Syria. And there's about 20,000 Syrians living there, all of whom I'm sure would rather be living in Israel right now than in Syria. I think Trump did a lot of things in Israel that people predicted would cause chaos and catastrophe and then didn't. So, when he moved the embassy, people were like, there's going to be mass riots, and there weren't, and then he withdrew funding from UNRWA, from the aid to the Palestinians, and people were like, there's going to be mass bloodshed, and then there wasn't. And now he sort of recognized the Golan Heights, and people were predicting that, this is going to be, a huge travesty and lead to the annexation of the West Bank. I think so far people have been wrong a lot in interpreting his actions towards Israel. Another thing that struck me at AIPAC was that, Trump, he's sort of a bit of a troll, right? Like, he loves to pick on issues that are dear to liberals' hearts and sort of raise them up for apparently no reason, like transgender folks in the military. Like, why does he care about that? Well, because it trolls liberals, It's like, it makes us upset. So it's like, so he does a lot of things like that, immigration, picking on our sacred cows. And I think that's what he tried to do with Israel, He didn't do it for that. It was very clear that he had a relationship with evangelical communities that he was trying to please, and that Sheldon Adelson very explicitly gave him campaign donations. Thank you. In exchange for certain things like moving the embassy, but he failed to turn these into trolls, and I think it's a lot because of the bipartisanship of AIPAC and the bipartisanship of the U.S.-Israel relationship. So we can talk about that later, like whether I think the Democratic Party is turning against Israel. Actually, I don't think they are. So I think people have been very bad at reading Trump and what will happen when he does X, Y, Z vis-a-vis the Palestinians. I have to say that at this point, I fail to see how annexing the West Bank would make things worse for the Palestinians, right? They're already living under military occupation and don't have the right to vote for the government that controls their lives. So what would annexing the West Bank actually make worse for them? In fact, Ruvi Rivlin, the president of Israel, is a proponent of a one-state solution in which the entire West Bank is annexed and all the Palestinians become citizens. Now, if you say you're a one-stater in America, you, like Rashida Tlaib, you get called an anti-Semite, right? Oh, you don't believe in the Jews have the right to self-determination. But there's a right-wing version of that, too. So when I'm thinking about people sort of very much up in, the entire sort of national security punditry class is very up in arms over this Golan Heights recognition, but I sort of fail to see why they're so upset about it, just because it can't get worse for the Palestinians in the West Bank. International recognition that this is sort of illegally occupied territory has done nothing for them. And especially now with the recognition of all of the moderate Arab states, it's not likely to do anything for them. So how would things be worse for them if that happened?
Right. I tend to agree. I feel as though there's such a difference between the West Bank and between the Golan Heights. I feel as though everything that Trump has done has been recognizing the status quo as is. I mean, Jerusalem was always the capital, and the Golan Heights were never going to be given back. But were they to annex the West Bank, then there would be, that would be upheaval within both the American and Israeli world. I feel as though some writers, Thomas Friedman, are way behind on this issue and don't really understand that same difference between the two. So let's come back and talk. You alluded to this here, that it seems as though, and I got this at AIPAC, very much the feeling that there is an attempt by the Republican Party to push Israel and support of Israel to the forefront of the platform, and thereby to either challenge the Democratic Party to match where they are, or to make it a breaking point for the American Jewish community to hopefully pick up some of those 70 to 80% of American Jews that vote for the Democrats on usual election cycles. Did you sense that as well at AIPAC, and how do you see the Democratic Party handling that challenge?
I did sense that. I think that's probably been true for a while, where Republicans are always trying to sort of tell Jews that the Democratic Party doesn't love Israel enough, doesn't love Jews enough. So we are blessed with an incredibly diverse 2020 presidential cohort, right? There's I don't know, tens of people running for president on the Democratic side. I think there's maybe 30 at this point. There's a lot. They're incredibly diverse. They are incredibly undiverse on one topic. Do you want to know what it is? Can you guess? Well, that's true. They all don't like Trump. They all have the same exact politics about Israel. So surprising. All of these people, you've got people from really all walks of American life, all creeds, all colors, all religions, and all of them agree on Israel. Every single person who has declared that they are running for office supports a two-state solution and opposes the boycott of Israel. Even Bernie Sanders. So the Jewish guy is the furthest to the left. He's sort of the standard bearer for how far you can get. He's very critical of Israel. He's very critical of the occupation, very critical of what's going on in Gaza. Calls himself pro-Israel and is on the record opposing the boycott. And he's where, by the way, all of the Democratic Socialists who all have endorsed the boycott of Israel, they're all in his camp. So what does that tell you, So on the one hand, they're not pro-Israel in the way that Trump is, right? They're not likely to give this blank check and to encourage Netanyahu's worst tendencies. They're a lot like us. They're a lot like American Jews, because we're pro-Israel but critical of Israel, right? We're 85% of us oppose the occupation, and thanks to Trump, we're now more willing than ever to say it. So the Democratic Party has it has moved to the left, but it's moved to the left and stopped exactly where we are. So I think that's great, because I want to see my elected officials having my exact politics. If they move further to the left, I'll start to get worried. But at this point, I'm much happier that they are where I am than that they would be where the Republicans are, who never criticize the occupation, who don't want to help the Palestinian cause, who want to keep encouraging Bibi's ethno-nationalism. So when people say that, the Republicans are trying to steal Democratic voters, tell them that, the Democratic Party is becoming anti-Israel, I just sort of laugh, because the Democrats have never looked more like the American Jewish community than they do today.
Interesting. And I just want to, there was a bit of a brouhaha over the fact that MoveOn.org sent out basically a list of Democratic presidential candidates who are going to boycott AIPAC. And then all of a sudden these candidates started showing up at AIPAC, and so there was Cory Booker, there was Kirsten Gillibrand, there was Amy, what's the last name? Klobuchar, I'm going to always ruin that last name. Yes, was this something that you were paying attention to as well?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
what do you think that says that that despite this push, that the Democratic presidential candidates felt the need to show up at AIPAC?
I mean, I think next year you will see some of them actually not being invited and not showing up. So this year, none of them were invited because AIPAC doesn't invite on off election years. So they weren't actually invited. And meanwhile, the far left was like, victory, they're all boycotting AIPAC. And it was like, no, they're not. They weren't invited. And then they showed up anyway. I think next year you will see Bernie Sanders and possibly Elizabeth Warren not go to AIPAC and make a big deal out of it. But essentially, so again, it's like I'm in this weird place of like defending AIPAC, but so what happened was when I snuck into, I was a bad journalist, and so at AIPAC what happens is you have 3 days of like lectures, and then on the last day, all of the attendees, who are people just like you, they go en masse up to the Hill, to Capitol Hill, and they meet with their elected officials. And they have with them a list of AIPAC, an agenda that has 3 items on it, and these people who are doctors and kindergarten teachers and lawyers, they go and visit with their congressperson, and they split up the group. There's a group of them, and each one presents to their elected official, their congressperson and their senator, one of the 3 items. So it's not a professional lobbyist. It's not a person who's getting paid. It's just a Jewish person who cares a lot about Israel. So I kind of was interviewing some people as they were making this migration, and I kind of slipped in and snuck in and sat in the room. And so I could get a sense of what it was like. And it was not about the Benjamins at all. It was a congresswoman sitting with 15 people who had come to Capitol Hill to sit with her. And as they, in very unprofessional, wavering voices told her, why Israel matters to them. I mean, this is what American politics is supposed to look like. So it's true that the meeting was set up by AIPAC, right? It's true that AIPAC may host a fundraiser for somebody or somebody else, but the real power behind AIPAC is American citizens. So why should we have less of a right to go and speak to our elected officials just because we're Jewish? That's what I don't understand in all of the... So what Kamala Harris did was she met with constituents. To boycott that would be to boycott, it's almost like to boycott Jewish constituents because of what they care about. Like, it's such a gross feeling to me. And so in some ways I'm like, I'm critical of AIPAC, but when, the far left is out there being like, AIPAC is using its money to blah, 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 I'm like, they're talking about me. Like, they're talking about Jews in a way that we really recognize. So I kind of do feel like the glee, the joy with which they announce, like, oh, look at them boycotting these Jews, So I don't know. I feel like, yes, AIPAC is extremely powerful. It's extremely well organized. It's doing its thing. And as we can have a conversation about whether there's too much lobbying in American politics, but somehow singling this out feels a little bit off to me.
Well, let me just ask a follow-up, and I promise we'll move off of AIPAC at a point here, but I think it's really interesting. You tend to be critical of AIPAC's lack of political stance. I find that to be sort of their secret sauce that makes it all work. And I think that we can, agree on 99% of the, when we say those two things. I'm wondering what your thoughts of our alternate groups such as J Street, If Not Now, ones that are really trying to establish themselves as alternatives to AIPAC. Do you think that splinters the Jewish voice and therefore weakens the ability for us to connect with our politicians? Or do you think that it creates a more vibrant approach to expressing our Jewish voice and Zionist voice in Congress?
Always more speech, always more people lifting up their voices.
So have you attended any meetings of J Street or If Not Now, and what are your experiences with that community and their mission?
I think J Street's politics align much more closely with the majority of American Jews, but they're not out in the community. They're very focused on Capitol Hill, and I think what they're going to do is they're going to give the Democrats a landing pad. Next year, the Democrats are not going to want to boast about an AIPAC endorsement because it'll be seen as too far to the right. They're going to want the J Street endorsement, which is pro-Israel, pro-peace, which is basically the American Jewish point of view.
Right, but then you're going to get the far right, which then the labels of J Street as being Soros and about being the far, there's all of these sort of canards from the far left about it too, and you can see that the Republican Party using that to weaponize it against these left groups.
I think it's funny because in some ways I think that Trump was he played a really important role here because he kind of played to AIPAC's right. And so by being essentially a one-man Israel lobby, he already kind of diversified the field. Mm-hmm. But I can't help but think it's always good. It's always good to have more avenues for expression. So
let's go back. You were speaking about, in your own view of AIPAC, that to deny the Jewish ability to lobby Congress is to say that we Jews should have power, and that seems to move from anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism. So let's get to that. It's something that we speak a lot about in our community is anti-Zionism effectively anti-Semitism? Can one be anti-Zionist but still adhere to basic ideas of pluralism, of equality? Where do you see the litmus between the two?
So I would say like this. There's obviously a gray area where anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism overlap. This is a very difficult question, and it's getting more and more difficult to answer, not easier and easier. I can tell you just anecdotally from my own Twitter feed, I get a lot of hate. You'd be surprised when I get more hate from the left than the right, even though I'm on the left. I can still tell when I'm getting left-wing hate if the person is British or American immediately. Immediately. Why? Because the British, the way they use anti-Zionism is 100% anti-Semitic. I can just tell, before clicking on the person's avatar, I can tell where they live because the left here is very careful. And the left in England, there's just so even in two places, right, I would say the overlap between anti-Zionists and anti-Semites in England is almost 100% based on just the people who are attacking me. But here, I don't feel that same way. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But what it tells me is that I don't think there's anything inherently anti-Semitic in believing that that Israel should not be a Jewish state, that it should be a democratic state, a totally secular democratic state. There's nothing inherent in that position that is anti-Semitic. Why? Anti-Semitism is hatred of Jews. It's racism. It's racial bias against a community, right? And Israel is a political entity. So you can oppose even the existence of a political entity without hating the people who live there. That said, if Israel is the only nation state on the planet that you think shouldn't exist, you personally probably don't like Jews, right? But again, that's not in the position itself, that's in the person. So I tend to distinguish between those two things. Now, does it matter, Do I want someone who's out there who maybe doesn't like Jews having power, No, right? So I completely understand why Jews are they see the anti-Zionism and they're that's good enough for me to know that I don't want this person to ever have power or ever have the power to decide, X, Y, or Z, right? So for example, Rashida Tlaib, right? She's a congresswoman, she's a freshman congresswoman. She opposes Israel as a Jewish state, okay? She hasn't said it in exactly those words, but she pretty much is a one-stater and believes in the right of return. She wants there to be just a binational state there. I don't think she's anti-Semitic. She has incredibly good relations with the Jews in her community, with the J Street people in her community. To me, I think it's very clear that she does not have a problem with Jews, that she is not against Jews, that she has no negative feelings towards Jews. That said, do I want her to be the president of the United States or in charge of deciding how much money Israel gets? No, because I don't want somebody out there who is advocating with a significant amount of power against the existence of the state of Israel. But she is a person who I really feel is anti-Zionist, right? Doesn't believe in the right of Israel to exist, but is definitely not anti-Semitic.
Well, let me ask it this way. Is it anti-Semitic to believe that every people has its own right to national sovereignty except for the Jews?
Well, I don't think anybody thinks every person does, right? And on the flip side, I'm sure you and I feel, let's say tomorrow they annexed the West Bank and gave all the Palestinians their citizenship, right? I would be perfectly happy with that, even though those Palestinians would never have a national right to self-determination, right? I don't think that national self-determination is the only form of self-determination, right? So for example, we American Jews, right? We feel completely equal before the law, I feel totally self-realized and self-actualized as an American. I don't feel that because I'm a minority here and I don't have, national self-determination in this, what is essentially a white Christian country, that I am any less equal to other Americans. And I think we feel that way about Palestinians who live in Israel, who have total citizenship rights, right? So a lot of people don't have, the right to national self-determination, to have a nation state of your own, is not one that's universally recognized, right? The Kurds don't have one. The Catalans don't have one. There's lots of peoples out there who were perfectly fine with not having their own state. Now, if somebody came and said to me, the Catalans need a state, the Kurds need a state, but the Jews really, I wish they didn't have one. Yeah, this person probably has a problem with Jews.
I mean, my only distinction is you and I have made a conscious choice to live in America and not to pursue, be part of the national realization of Jewish identity. An Irish person living in America who doesn't want to live in Ireland, live in the Irish diaspora, the same thing. But to refuse those who choose to have that right, to exercise that right, while others do get to exercise it, does seem anti-Semitic to me, because it seems to create a double standard. What would you say to that?
I would say like this. I don't think other people are responsible for their ideas taken to the logical conclusion that we see. You know what I'm saying? So, like, for example, somebody who says, I want a one-state solution in Israel. I want the right of return for Palestinians, and I think that there should be, there should be full equal rights for every Palestinian who lives there, right? So then I can then say, well, in that situation, there won't be an Israel, because if you're going to bring in 6 million Palestinians, Jews will not be the majority anymore, and then how will you call it a Jewish state? You're an anti-Semite, right? I don't feel that they are responsible for the fact that I am sitting here having a logical, having a thought of like, well, your ideologically leads to that. Because they can say, no, I'm not committed to that. Like, you can have a Jewish state, you cannot have a Jewish state. What I'm saying I want is full equal rights. Right? So I just don't feel like you can call that racial hatred, because we can say, well, I see that buried in that is a double standard that they themselves are either not aware of or don't actually support. You know what I mean?
Okay, and this last one on this, and if I would say to that, well, but then why do you seem to be so concerned about when Jews are occupying, but when the Turks are occupying, or when the Chinese are occupying, or when the Russians are occupying, it doesn't seem to upset you so much? Is that anti-Semitism?
I'm not going to say that I don't have that thought. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't. When I see like random white people around the world being obsessed with Israel, I'm not thinking to myself like, why do you care about this so much? I do have that thought. But at the same time, I think people are allowed to choose a topic to care about. Like, I just think people are allowed to say, this is the thing I saw on CNN, my heart went out to those people, and now I care about that topic. It gets a lot of news coverage because it's a very, very sexy topic, and I think people are allowed to just randomly say, that's the topic I care about, and I'm actually glad it's the topic that I care about too, because I think we've done a really bad job of like solving it. So, the Palestinians I'm close to who don't have civil rights, like, I'm glad for any extra attention that the topic can get.
So, listen, you're very active, online, and I feel like you have a good sense of Gen Y and the millennials and their connection to Israel or lack thereof. And as Israel, goes from originally being, for many people here, they grew up with Israel as the David to the Arab Goliath and the feel-good story of 1967, and that Israel was always a cause for Jewish pride, whereas for many younger Americans, it's sort of like the embarrassing uncle at the table of, oh, I don't want to talk about occupation right now. I don't want to talk about Syria or the Golan Heights. Where do you see this issue continuing with younger Americans? And should we be worried about how and if our youngest generation will feel any connection to the Jewish state at all.
We have to change the way we educate about Israel. So if before we were educating about Israel and saying, we should be so proud, look at all this great stuff to be proud about, there's now actually a lot to be ashamed of. We have to teach young people how to handle that. It's no longer simple to be a Zionist, but it's still obviously imperative for our community. And so we have to teach them how to be uncomfortable Zionists. Like right now, they don't know how to do that. Like they only know how, like, oh, Israel is this amazing, like, and then as soon as they realize it's not and that there's a lot of stuff going on there that's really upsetting, they're like, oh, I mean, I think it's exaggerated how much they're really abandoning Israel. You know, a lot of kids go on birthright and come back like super rah, rah, rah. Like, I don't think we have to be like, you know, mourning the relationship yet, but I think we need to be educating them how to be uncomfortable Zionists. You know, it has to be more textured. Our relationship to Israel has, you know, we like as educators, as parents, as leaders, we have to be like, yeah, there's stuff that happens there that makes me really uncomfortable too. Like, yeah, Jewish and democratic is a tension, you know, like we have to learn how to be uncomfortable with our, you know, our commitments there, because it is a difficult thing to be attached to, especially under Bibi.
I get the sense I'm probably a little further to the right of you on this, that's a good thing. And we're not going to start like crossfire right now back and forth, but you know, I personally wouldn't use the word ashamed, or I feel as though it's more complicated, it's more difficult, because like you said, I don't think that the average Israeli wants to be an occupier. I think if they could get out of the situation and they could remain secure and safe, they would absolutely do so. And it's really easy to portray Israel as the powerful occupier who is denying the freedom of a less powerful entity. Whereas I think if you look at the larger map, I think it's really easy to also say that the smaller country of Israel is struggling to maintain its security amidst a sea of much larger and well-armed enemies. So I'm not sure I would use the word ashamed. I would feel myself to be very proud to be a Zionist, and I despite any feelings of I would say of challenge with the Israeli policy, and I would liken it to being a proud American, that, you know, I don't love everything that my country does, but I still believe it's an amazing country and a place that allows me to pursue my goals in an amazing way, and it accepts me as a Jew in a way that no other country before ever has. I believe that Israel is in a complicated place, but I think it's for us trying to explain to our children that Israel is not perfect, but it's also not terrible. And I think that those are the two messages they most often get, is Israel is either the solution or the problem, and it's okay if it's neither. What are your thoughts to that?
No, I love that. I think that's beautiful.
Oh, good. We agree now. Okay, good. Now we're going on.
I definitely don't want to suggest that, you know, the Palestinians are like pure victims and that Israel is a pure aggressor. I definitely think that it's really complicated. The Palestinian leadership is atrocious. The only people Hamas cares about less than Israeli lives are Palestinian lives. Like, I definitely agree with all of that. And I definitely think there's no partner for peace. I happen to think that a lot could be achieved unilaterally, and that Bibi has really, I think that he really was a kind of early harbinger of this return to ethno-nationalism. Like, we were all living in this like Obama world where everything was like so great, globalization, and, you know, the world, every progress seemed, you know, to be happening, and, you know, national borders were slipping away. And Bibi, you know, decades ago realized like, oh no, it's coming back. And in that sense, he really made the whole world less safe for Jews, and is really Trump's twin in that way. Although in a very different way, there clearly is an intelligence gap between the two of them. Sorry, yes.
No, that's okay. I mean, the only thing I would say there is that I think sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, and that I think what most American Jews don't realize is that Bibi does not represent the far right of Israel by any means. If Netanyahu is getting pressure from the Israeli populace, it is from the right, and he represents something towards the center left of where his competition is coming from. And that's something that most American Jews, who really see him as being out of touch with what they think Israeli society is, they don't realize that he's actually right on the pulse of it. So let's come back and talk about, and then I want to make sure to make time to open up questions for others as well. So you're saying that you're being critical of Israel, but that the Palestinians as well have much to answer for. If you could right policy for the Israeli government in order for it to, in your eyes, be all that you think it should aspire to be, what would be your main steps? What would you want Israeli policy to be?
Oh, wow. I'm not even a voter in Israel, but I would say there's two options. There's so to me, the number one priority is not even Gaza, because they pulled out of Gaza, I would end the blockade, but at the same time, Gaza is sovereign, and so the humanitarian crisis keeps me up at night, but not on a civil rights issue. So to me, it's really the civil rights in the West Bank that I would just, there's two options. Either, unilaterally, I would, create a border with a Palestinian state, keep the big settlement blocks and withdraw from everything else, and just unilaterally establish, a border there. Or I would totally annex the West Bank and give all the Palestinians their civil rights, and then you can have a freaking soldier on every corner and make sure that there's no terrorism,
Yeah.
and there would be no moral issue there, because they would have the right to vote for the government that controls their lives. I think both of those are great options, and both of those are really easy options. I'm totally mystified why people don't solve this problem immediately.
The second one is much more challenging to me than it is to you, because that is the negation of the Jewish state.
Why? There's only 1.8 million Palestinians in the West Bank.
There's almost how many?
1.8 million.
Okay, and then what are the birth rates?
They're much lower than actually. So this is interesting. So the Palestinian birth rates in Gaza, the average woman has 5 children, because there's nothing else to do there, okay? And also because poor women have a lot of babies. Like, the first thing that happens when women get a little bit of economic security is they have fewer babies. So the average woman in the West Bank has 4 children. And the average Palestinian Israeli, the average Palestinian who has Israeli citizenship, 2.
And the average Orthodox Jewish Israeli has?
I think like 9.
Like 9, yes, it's pretty high like that. So you're saying that you believe that the West Bank can be annexed and Israel could basically have its cake and eat it too.
Yes.
Can have full democracy and maintain a Jewish majority in order to, keep it a Jewish state.
That's what I think, and if Israel did that tomorrow, I would become, I could see myself converting to a person who spent her entire life rounding up American Jews and moving them to Israel to keep that, demographic, whatever, Like, I would do that. I would give up whatever my life here, like, if that's the question, you know what I mean? I don't actually think that Israel could absorb, the level of jobs that we have, but you know what I mean? If that was the thing that was really holding it back, I'm sure the American Jewish community would do its part.
So here's my only thing to that, is that Israel was established as a refuge for Jews, so that Jews for the first time in history could protect themselves,
Yeah.
and they would be responsible for their own security, right? How in the world would you allow in 1.8 million people who, for the past 70 plus years, have been articulating their hope for your destruction in religious terms, no less? And do you honestly feel as though the Palestinian people would relinquish those terms for a complete domination over the land and removal from Jews from the land if they gain citizenship? How would you be able to give Israelis the security of mind, the peace of mind, that it would not be the destruction of their state after hearing and seeing what they have, and after Palestinian school books teaching Palestinian children that Jews are the devil and animals and deserve to be killed?
And I'll up the ante even more. So anti-Semitism rates across the world. So it's about, if you ask, like, in Western Europe, if you ask people, like, how do you feel about Jews? So, like, about 10% will be like, I just don't like them, It's like, it's 10%, And you move to Eastern Europe and you say, like, how do you feel about Jews? It's like, about 20% will be like, I just don't like them, It goes a little higher. And then when you get down to, like, Africa, it rises about 70%. And when you get to the Palestinian territories, it's 98%. Like, anti-Semitism levels in Palestine are off the charts. They're basically almost like the entire population. And, like, I could tell you, like, as somebody who's, like, spent a lot of time there, like, people will tell you crazy things, Oh, you're one of the good ones, but, the Jews, whatever. So, like, the ante is quite high. At the same time, like, I think if you ask black people in America, how do you feel about white people? A lot of black people really don't like white people. Like, we've been pretty bad to them,
I don't think they're the devil. or that they don't think they're the devil, or that they are, you know, animals, or that they deserve to be.
But they have negative feelings towards them. You know, at the end of the day, civil rights are not a gift for being good people, right? Like, they're not a reward for not hating Jews or for having the right point of view. Civil rights are something that every human should be guaranteed. And so to me, that stuff is really, number one, it's not a real barrier. It's morally, it's not a barrier. But also, I think at the same time, you know, people just want to live in peace. Like, they just want to have their lives. And I think that especially if this is now part of Israeli territory, you know, Israel will be able to police it, right? You have in Israel proper a lot of Palestinians who really don't like Jews. And for the most part, they don't try to kill us, right? So I think that is definitely a surmountable problem, but also because I don't believe in policing people's thoughts, like, you know, people are allowed to be anti-Semites, right? Like, we're Americans. People are even allowed to say anti-Semitic things in this great nation. So I think that should not be a barrier, and that Israelis using that as a barrier are really sacrificing other people's civil rights for their own feelings, which is, I don't think, justifiable.
Thank you. So I have one more question to ask. I hope you guys don't mind. It's been a bit of a back and a forth, but I find it to be a really engaging conversation. I do, at least. It's 8:30. So we're going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to make time for 3 questions here from the audience. And then we're going to have oneg afterwards. And maybe, Batya, you can hang around for a while at our oneg. And if people want to continue the conversation, we can do so there. Would that be okay with you? I just want to talk a little bit lastly, about going back to American anti-Semitism and looking at it from the right and from the left. And you get a lot of this, of course, online through your work on Twitter, that the left will tell you that anti-Semitism is strongest from the right, that it's from the both very fine people statements of the president or from Steve King, those types. And then the right will say it's actually from the left. It's from the Rashida Tlaib, it's from the Ilhan Omar. It's that, you know, that they are out of control in their criticism of Jews. When you look at this from a broad perspective, do you worry about anti-Semitism in America? And if so, do one of those 2 poles worry you more than the other?
So I thought about what I would answer to this, and I think I'm very worried about anti-Semitism on the right. I think about Pittsburgh still every single day. I don't think Ilhan Omar, in her mind, thinks that she hates Jews. That's a huge difference, right? Like, the guy who murdered 11 Jews, in his mind, was very aware of the fact that he didn't like Jews. On the other hand, you know, President Trump obviously really likes Jews, but has put us in danger. I mean, it's clear, to me, when I see him around Jews, I think, oh, this guy clearly likes Jews, but he's endangered us with his conspiracy theories about George Soros and his, you know, which were the explicit reason that, you know, Richard Bowers killed those Jews. You know, Kevin McCarthy, the GOP House leader, tweeted out an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory about Jews trying to buy the elections, right? So he would be, I think, in the Ilhan Omar category of somebody who clearly doesn't think he hates Jews and said something anti-Semitic. But this stuff is treated as permission for people like David Duke, you know, who retweets this very gleefully. So there's a lot of rising anti-Semitism from the right. There's also Orthodox Jews are being beaten up by people who are on the left in their communities in New York, which doesn't get a lot of press, but is very, very upsetting. I would say that, like, the thing that keeps me up at night is I'm very worried about it on the right because it's more physically dangerous. On the left, what I'm more worried about than anti-Semitism is a level of cruelty that has seeped into the discourse. So the left feels right now very disempowered. And what this has done is it has made them cruel. So when I get attacked by, like, neo-Nazis, it's kind of almost in this, like, kind of joking tone. Like, it's obviously gross and awful and evil. Like, they really think Jews are, you know, subhuman and also controlling the world and all sorts of horrible things. But the way that they talk to Jews is not like in this kind of cruel, abusive way. They say the things you expect to hear, like, oh, stop trying to replace all of the white people in this country with, you know what I mean? It's like that kind of stuff. The left, there's this level of cruelty in the way that they attack their own. And it comes from being disempowered. It comes from feeling like, you're not the people in power. But my mentor, his name is Issa Amro, and he's a Palestinian who lives under occupation in Hebron. He's actually facing jail time, both from Israel and from the Palestinian Authority. Like, he gets arrested one day by the Palestinian Authority and the next day by Israel. And on Monday, he'll be going to trial in Israel for 18 counts, one of which is insulting a soldier. Like, it's really, really bad. And then on May 22nd, he'll be in Palestinian Authority court for insulting the Palestinian Authority. Like, it's really, really terrible. But he is an activist, and he's a nonviolent activist. He's devoted his life to teaching Palestinian children the value of nonviolent activism. And he'll go into their schools, and he'll say to them, why throw rocks? Why give them an excuse to shoot you? Put down the rocks. Only with nonviolence can we achieve anything. And his philosophy is that when you use violence as a form of resistance, that violence is directed outward, but it seeps into your community, because that's what violence